Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, from a cold and windy Cape Town. Don't know why it's windy. That's very weird, but we have some good news. Minister Nkabane, the former Minister of Higher Education and Training, was fired last night by President Cyril Ramaphosa. This comes after a massive battle between the DA and the ANC. As Ramaphosa earlier this year, well, a couple of months ago at this point, maybe not even a couple of months, Andrew Whitfield, the former Deputy Minister of Trade and Industry, was fired by the president for apparently flying to America without permission. This is after Andrew Whitfield had asked for permission and the president just never responded to it. And then some people pretended like, well, that's a no. Anyways, that's not a no. That's just not a response. The president, once again, not doing his job, but none of us are surprised by this. Okay, so Andrew Whitfield gets fired. The DA sort of immediately goes into battle mode. They throw down the gauntlet and they say, ultimatum time. If you don't fire all of your corrupt ministers in parliament and in the cabinet, you'll see, right? So the DA comes online and 2 days later, and they say, we're withdrawing from the national dialogue immediately. Everyone in the country's like, so no one wanted this in the first place. Who gives a crap, right? So that doesn't matter. It's the next one that at the time, I didn't necessarily even know how important this was going to be. But I'll be honest, I don't know much about, well, I've been learning a lot about parliamentary procedures and the laws that govern our parliament. Of course, I didn't know that before I really started diving into politics more deeply. But effectively, if one budget from a ministerial sort of portfolio fail, the whole appropriations bill fails. And this means the entirety of the government goes to complete lockdown. They get about 30% of the previous year's budget that they can spend in the immediate. And then after that, it's 10% every single month of the remaining 70% of the budget. That 10% isn't even enough to cover salaries for most of the ministerial portfolios. And so it would mean the government comes to a complete halt. Now, from the perspective of South Africans, that's not that bad because the government tends to do best when they're not doing anything. That's when the rand gets stronger, the economy starts growing. The second the president speaks, the rand gets weaker, the economy starts crumbling. So obviously, from that perspective, I would like to see what happens when the government of South Africa shuts down. They just throw the dice and see what happens, right? But from the perspective of the government, this would be terrible. There would be tens of thousands of employees that would currently be out of a job because they can't get paid. You'd probably have riots and anger and all sorts of stuff. And the last thing the government needs is the country waking up and realizing, oh, wait, we don't need the government? What do you mean we don't need the government? But anyway, so with Nkabane out, we now have Bhuti Manamela that has replaced her. And at least according to academics within... Sorry, skipping through a bunch of stuff here. Oh, this is the article I want, right? So at least according to academics within the country, and they spoke to a number of like professors at different universities, Nkabane was disliked by all of them because Nkabane would continuously make decisions that made no sense to the higher education sector of South Africa. And instead, they do think that Bhuti Manamela may actually be a better option because he served in this portfolio for quite a long time. He understands how this portfolio needs to work. Of course, this wasn't completely without its own sets of corruption, and that specifically, for me, comes from Namusa Dube Nkubi, right? Namusa is one of the people that caused this entire thing to happen. You see, how do we get here? Well, Minister Nkabane appointed a bunch of people to the CETA boards of South Africa. CETA stands for Sector Education and Training Authorities. They're kind of a big deal. A bunch of people were appointed to these boards. Among them were people like the son of Gwedi Mantashe. And a lot of people immediately started asking the question, the DA included, what the hell are you doing? Like, how did these people even qualify to be on these boards? The minister then sat in front of Parliament and said, well, we had an independent council that voted and decided who needs to be on these boards. And she named like 5 people who were on this board. And then of the 5 people who were apparently on this board, 4 of them came out within like 48 hours. And they were like, wait, I was on a board? When? Right? So everyone was just confused. And it turns out the minister was just lying through her teeth to Parliament, which, by the way, kind of a big deal. You're not allowed to do that. And so the DA has been hammering the president to get rid of Minister Nkabane. But the problem is that Dube Nkubi is one of the people that was appointed to these boards. And Dube, or Nkubi, is now the new Deputy Minister of Higher Education. So I'm sort of asking myself, wait, you have someone that were appointed under nefarious or at least suspicious clouds, now suddenly becoming the Deputy Minister? Dude, only in South Africa can one fail upwards. Like, you can be a part and embroiled in corruption and then just become the Deputy Minister of a new portfolio. It's insane. But that's where we are, and it's absolutely crazy to me. But now, how do we get here, and what exactly is happening? So the DA puts out a statement, and this is where I want to focus most of the rest of this video on. Why did President Cyril Ramaphosa do this? Now, News 24 is saying that President Cyril Ramaphosa buckled under the pressure from the DA. That immediately sort of made me afraid, right? So my immediate response there was, damn, okay, so this is a political game. Remember, after the firing of Andrew Whitfield, the DA said that we will not vote, we will not participate in the national dialogue, and we will not vote for any budgets of any ministers that are corrupt. This is one of the ministers that's corrupt. There's about 4 others that are under dark clouds of corruption. So the DA wants all 4 of those ministers gone. But what if this is a political game? That was my thinking. Right? Ramaphosa went to the DA and said, guys, come on, the budget has to pass. The last thing we need is the South African public realizing we're completely useless. And the DA was like, oh, crap, yeah, because we also get salaries from this. And the DA was like, okay, you have to throw us a bone. We stood up in front of the whole country and we said, hey, fire or else. And we can't just come back and vote for this. So you're going to have to do something for us. And then the ANC, Ramaphosa said, okay, fine. I'll get rid of Nkabane. And then you'll vote. And the DA was like, okay, cool. That's what I thought happened, right? And these kind of political games happen all the time. Parties will say stuff and then backroom deals will sort of sort that stuff out on its own. But it doesn't seem like that is actually what's happening here. So according to the DA themselves, right, seeing one ANC minister depart cabinet under storming clouds of lies, deceit, cadre deployment, corruption, and a Hawks investigation is a first step to restoring our faith that the GNU will not tolerate corruption. Our demand to President Ramaphosa was for him to take action against the seriously compromised, corrupt, and nefarious in the ANC, and the firing of Nkabane is the first step for him. One Nkabane does not a renewed ANC make. There is still a very long list of ANC corruption to be eradicated. This suggests to me that the ANC might still find themselves in a very serious and precarious position. Because tomorrow, that vote happens. And when that vote happens, and the DA votes no on a number of portfolios, that appropriations bill does not pass. That will put the country in a legal tailspin. Because the government shuts down. Now the government has one or two options. Either they negotiate and have a revote, or they have to go and challenge that in court because the Constitution isn't entirely clear on if only the portfolios that were rejected gets rejected, or if the whole appropriations bill is rejected. The prevailing legal mind around this says that the whole thing is rejected based on the language used in the Constitution and the governing laws of the Parliament, but we wouldn't know that until it finally plays out. Ultimately, the ANC and Cyril Ramaphosa is caught in a very, very tough position. Ramaphosa cannot turn against all of the corrupt ministers in his own party, because if he does, he will lose his faction. Because a lot of these ministers are there because they're part of the faction that supports him. Remember, the ANC has the RET faction, the Radical Economic Transformation Group. They would love to go with the MK party, right? Then they have the sort of corrupt state looter communists. They would love to go with the EFF. And then you have the more corrupt, communist, but sensible faction within the ANC. And these are the guys that's with Cyril Ramaphosa. Now, Cyril Ramaphosa, I think, is making a bigger play for the presidency of the ANC because he cannot serve anymore as the president of South Africa after this term. But I think he's trying to prove to the ANC that he can be the guy that bridges the gap between all of these factions. And so they should keep him on as the president of the ANC, even if there's another president for the country, something that we haven't tasted yet, but we might actually soon do. Uh, so I think that's what his play is, and that's why it's imperative that he keeps his faction strong without pissing off the other factions too much, because he wants to remain the president, and the ANC, especially since it's become so fractured and factionalized, may actually just decide to do that. Get a president that can keep the factions together, and then let the president of South Africa be a completely different guy, because ultimately the ANC governs the president of South Africa, who then governs South Africa. That, I think, is the player. This puts President Ramaphosa in a tight spot. He cannot get rid of all of the corrupt ministers, or at least corrupt implicated ministers in the country, because he would have to get rid of most of his ministers, and that would basically gut his entire faction, which would open the door widely for the EFF and the MK to step in and sort of ally with the factions that remain within the ANC. And those factions are not friendly to Ramaphosa. They're friendly to Paul Mashatile and sort of the string of cadres that come off. Gwede Mantashe is another one in there. We'll see how this plays out. I'm going to keep you guys up to date. As always, let me know in the comment section down below how you feel about the developments. It's exciting when this happens. Kind of scary, but also exciting. Hit the like if you liked, the dislike if you didn't. To all of the patrons, a massive shout out and thanks for your support. It means the absolute world to me. You can find links to that in the description down below. All videos are available on Patreon ad-free for $3 a month, so not that bad. And then, very importantly, if you do decide to like and comment, that does help out a ton. YouTube wants engaged viewers, but if you watched until now, you're engaged as hell, and I love you for it. Thank you so much. As always, see you in the next one. Peace.